Hello, everybody. We are back today, Friday episode of the Entrepreneur Hour. Today's guest, hopefully, he can join. He, um, I just sent him email checking, see what time he can jump on. But today's guest is Yuli Martinez. He is a for-profit and nonprofit lawyer. He works with us at Meta Bronx, and his history is pretty cool. And I wanted to have him join us and speak to you about the differences of for-profit, nonprofit law, things you should know, questions from the audience. I know always lawyer questions they cost money most of the times. You want to take advantage of right now. We got him on the show. Um, so Yuli, I met Yuli last year through a friend of a friend, and he's very, very interested in working and helping Bronx nonprofits and nonprofits in general. But he's from the Bronx, so he's really, really good at helping um, companies and nonprofits from the Bronx, succeed, because this is a tough world, and lawyers are very important. And if you have a lawyer that you can trust and you can that understands the true problems with the way things go, it's just better for you. So that's where Yuli has been amazing, and hopefully he can jump on, like I said. And but while we get there, I'll continue to talk about what is going on. So, for instance, today we have a huge meeting with the funder for Meta Bronx. We're really trying to get, as I've mentioned in the past in other episodes, the summer youth program of New York City was canceled this year because of budget cuts, because COVID and economy, all these things. So summer youth was really cut. I think it said 48% of the budget for SYEP was cut. I'm not sure if that's all summer. I don't know how it all works, but I just know they said there's no summer youth this summer so far. So what we're doing now with Meta Bronx is we are working with some for-profit companies and charter schools, private schools, to see if we can fund some kids to go through our program and get experience with technology startups, get mentored by people in the technology industry over the summer, and get some real valuable experience, because we're all working from home as technologists. If you've been watching the news, Twitter pretty much said none of the employees have to come back. They can work remote forever if they want. So that is the way I see a lot of work going. I really do. I do see a lot, especially with tech. Why have to rent expensive space for employees that don't really need to be in front of you at all times? Of course, there's pros and cons to being in an work environment. But I think technologists, we are used to being in our dungeons and just coding away and needing as least amount of distractions as possible. So I've done it. I love working from home. I've had multiple offices and I still rather work from home. But maybe that's because of my role. But I think things will get much more streamlined when it comes to remote working, now that the whole world has to do it right now for a little bit of time. So today it's a big day. We have to practice this pitch. So our pitch today, we're going to have two of our startups that the kids would be interning at, right? So one of the startups, he was on the show a few weeks ago, is Marlon Jenkins. His startup is called Netcher. Netcher is a broadband company. They help people get lower cost broadband. So in the Bronx, that's a huge issue. So these kids this summer will be getting experience at that company. And then the second company is a woman-led startup called The Glass Files by Sarah Poirier. She'll be on the show one day too. And what they do is they allow history to be told by people on their app, theglassfiles.com. And theglassfiles.com, what it does is they work with schools, they work with individuals that want to tell their family stories and connect it to actual history. So like for instance, last year when we could do this, and I don't know if we can do it this year, maybe it needs to happen over Zoom or over something like this. We sent the kids to a senior center, a senior old folks home. I don't know the right term for it, but we send them to interview people in those communities, and the kids just loved it, to speak to people. That these kids are like 13 years old and they're speaking to like 80, 90-year-olds about their lives, and the kids loved it, the seniors loved it, and the stories are told on the Glass Files. So this year we plan to do more of that with the Glass Files and many other things. We've literally had kids that are on the software team for the Glass Files, kids that are on the writing team, on the marketing team, right? So there's many different opportunities for the kids that go through our program. And then we're also in this presentation, we're gonna go for the jugular. We're bringing one of our kids that have gone through the program. So as a nonprofit, right, you want to show potential funders the benefits that your program does. So what's better than to show you someone that has gone through it and it has changed their lives? So we have this one girl she's a rock star. Her name is Brenda. She has, when she came in, her family's from Africa. She came to America. She wasn't born here. She is a hard worker, as most immigrants, are, right? So she came to us and she said, I would really like to do accounting. So at that time, we did have like a back office kind of environment where if you wanted to learn more about running a company and helping a company from behind the scenes, you could be in that section of Metabronx and help whatever startup or Metabronx. So she said, I want to learn more about accounting. So we said, okay. And we gave her access to help us with our books at Metabronx. She did amazingly, like amazing. So we said, do you want to try it with a startup? So we gave her to one of our startups. She did amazing. Then that was over a certain amount of time. And every year, the way we do it with Metabronx is the older kids teach the younger kids, right? So the younger kids, she started to create a group of younger kids that pretty much were taught by her how to do books. So she basically created her own team, and now she runs a team of kids that do people's books, startups' books, and Metabronx's books. So that type of environment, I hadn't seen it before I tried to create it. I don't know if it existed. It could have. I'm not sure. We're not the first people to think of this, but it doesn't exist in these communities. I haven't seen it. So, and then to have the experience of working with a tech startup with their books, that 1000% does not exist. So we are really looking forward to today. It's going to be a cool, experience. I got to practice after the show. We got to do some dry runs, but yes. So that's my day today. Wish me luck. Better Bronx needs the funding for the kids to get the summer experience they deserve. We'll see. Hopefully, this funder sees the potential. And we've been talking to a lot more different people. But this funder, if this works out, we're good for the summer. And 100 kids will get the experience to go through multiple startups, different environments. And thank you, Tina. And go through an experience that it'd be very difficult for anyone to get, but let alone a 13-year-old that just, is in high school. So really looking forward to that. I'm not sure if Yuli is going to get here or not. I did reach out, haven't heard back. He is a lawyer though. There's some things that are more important than joining my show. Hopefully everything is okay. None of his clients are dealing with anything crazy. So let me try to just fill some of the information that I know based on speaking to Yuli and people like him. So, and having a for-profit and a nonprofit. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I have gone through in creating a for-profit and creating a nonprofit. So I'll start with nonprofit because people don't really understand the difference a lot of times. So in a nonprofit, the funny term they say is a nonprofit can't make money. I mean, can't profit. I messed it up. Can't profit. It can only make money, right? So nonprofits, they tend to have a lot more legalities to them because they don't pay taxes on their profits because they're reinvested into the company, into the nonprofit. So you have to have a lot of documents in place so you don't jeopardize that government distinction of a nonprofit. Because if you do, then what happens is your funders, they have to pay taxes on the money they gave you, right? So let's say I'm a nonprofit and like today we're asking a funder to give us $100,000, right? So that funder is going to give us $100,000, and if it was an individual, they could write that off on their taxes. So it's like if they made $100,000 less. So the reason rich people do that, or organizations do that, is to go down in tax bracket to pay less taxes a lot of times. So what they'll do is, let's say, and I don't remember the tax brackets off the top of my head, but let's say when you go over, let's say you made $1 million, right? And you and the tax bracket changes if you only made 900,000. So by giving to a nonprofit, your total amount that you made that year goes under the 900,000. So your tax bracket changes, and now you save on taxes. So there's math that's done where giving to a nonprofit actually benefits a rich person or an organization that can afford it. So as a nonprofit, you want to make sure that that person gets that write-off, because if they don't, they're going to be highly upset, right? Because they could have gave it to someone else that had their stuff together, their legal documents, everything together. So with a nonprofit, I don't deal with it personally. You know, as an entrepreneur, you got to make sure to put stuff on people that are better at things for you. I don't deal with the yearly thing we have to do. I believe it's every year you have to make sure you are still in good standings as a nonprofit, because the people who are giving you money, they have to make sure they can write that off. So for lawyers, when dealing with lawyers for a nonprofit, you have to create whatever the government wants to see and have everything in place. You have to have a board, right? And a board, well, you don't have to, but once you start raising a significant amount of money, nobody's going to give you money without a board, right? So you have to have a board. That board needs to be people that can help you when you need different things, right? So for instance, I'm on the board of Metabronx. I mean, I co-founded Metabronx. I'm on the board of BronxWorks. BronxWorks is they help 60,000 people in the Bronx. Their board is huge, and their board has all different types of people. I was asked to come on the board because I know technology, and I'm from the Bronx, and I know what I know. So they asked me to be on the board, and I have to sign all kind of things, make sure there's no conflicts of interest, because if someone does something wrong, that nonprofit gets their license or whatever it's called revoked, and then everyone who donated does not get that benefit of donating to a nonprofit. So what you want to do is you want to make sure, if you're going to go into the nonprofit world, that you have an understanding of what laws the government wants you to have in place, your bylaws, your board, everything. You have to make sure, because if you do it wrong, it's almost impossible to recover from. So Yuli hopefully joins, but I don't know if he will. So I'm going to fill the space. You know how I do. So what Yuli has done for us with Metabronx is he's talked to us about the larger you get in the nonprofit space, where you start to get more and more money from people, the more stuff they're going to want to see. And when I say they, I mostly mean the funders, but so, and the government as well, right? When you're under a certain threshold, the government does less. They do care less about those legalities. And as you start to get into other thresholds of raising, you have to have certain things in place. So Yuli has helped us with that, because now we're getting into those higher echelons of raising money for the nonprofit. So as a person that has created one, it is a nightmare. If I told you what's easier to do, and I fought becoming a nonprofit, I never wanted to be in the nonprofit space. So my reason for that is, I just feel like from people, as people of color, a lot of our ideas are put into the nonprofit arena because they help people. So the way I saw business before I created a nonprofit, I said, no, we can make profit too. I don't want to be thought of as a do-good company that's only doing good. I want to do good and do well. So I don't want to be a nonprofit, right? So we tried to start it out as a for-profit. But what we quickly realized is, when you're trying to do good, you don't make money right away, right? So, for instance, MetaBronx, I'm going to give you the background. Me and Philip worked with startups for years. I'm talking about after hours, startups would come by. We would talk to them. We helped them. We didn't make a dime. Right? And then they would raise money, but we knew we needed that money. They needed that money to grow the company. So we said, look, maybe we'll get our reward later. Just keep going. We don't want to be the reason that, you can't do something that you really think you need to do. So just do it. So we didn't make any money, right? And we wanted, with my idea was, I wanted equity in as many companies as possible. So I was like, look, I'd rather take equity than take a few bucks, right? Like, when you're gonna give me a few $1,000s, I'd rather take a few percentage points, whatever that is, in a potential big future thing. So we started out trying to do that. So then what we did was we said, okay, let's go to companies and say, can you, as a for-profit, can you give us money to help startups that are coming up from communities of color? They really need your help. Not one was like, yes. They were like, yeah, we don't do that. So we said, all right. But there are a lot of nonprofits that do it. So we said, okay, let's look at the nonprofit space. So me, reluctantly, I went into a bunch of meetings about this, and I said, all right, I get it. But by that time, I was asked to be on the Bronx Works board. So I started to understand more about nonprofits. I did understand the differences more, because when I first thought nonprofit, I thought charity case. I did think this organization would be looked at as a charity case instead of a valuable thing that can make people money, right? But then once I got on the Bronx Works board, and I realized, this is I don't even want to say the current budget, but it's above $10 million a year, nonprofit, and way above that. So, and I saw how those meetings were run like a for-profit. Like it was like being in the boardroom of Pepsi. That's how those meetings are run. And I was like, and the people on the board are super duper high level. Like there were people in that board that were high level people in top for-profits in New York City and the world. And I remember being like, this is pretty much the same thing, right? Like, I don't even have this much of and I'm a for-profit, and my board is not like this. So I remember thinking, okay, so nonprofit is serious business. It's not charity, right? And I'm glad for that experience, right? But then I started to realize, okay, they, instead of a sales team, they have a development team, right? And a development team, same thing as sales. They have to find people that want to give money to their nonprofit, right? So that sales team, the development team, they work, in the board we are asked to help raise money for. That's what board members normally do. Mostly they are there for their technical expertise, but then raise money. But when you're on a board of a nonprofit, there's a lot of legal things you can't do. You can't be profiting from, I mean, there's many different laws around it. It's very tough to tell you as a non-lawyer, but the way it works is there's many rules that you cannot do as a board member of a nonprofit. Of course, seeing the Republicans and Trump now, I've seen a lot of things that I thought that wasn't possible, but they're doing it. So that's where good lawyers come in, I guess. You know what you can do, what you can't do. But so that's on the nonprofit side. The laws that you have to make sure you follow as a nonprofit are mostly around making sure you are fulfilling the nonprofit's goal. So for instance, Meta Bronx. Our goal is to help the disenfranchised mostly get into the innovation economy in two ways. Either through creating their own startups. So we help startups get to a point where they can raise money from traditional investors, venture capital, which right now is a very, very small amount of non-white men that get financed in venture capital. So we thought that needs to change. My partner is white. He will be on the show one day too. Today he's just going crazy while I'm talking on the show. He's prepping everybody for our meetings. So if Meta Bronx suddenly started to do something else, then our nonprofit is in jeopardy because we are not doing what we said we are going to do to make us a nonprofit. So if we start saying, okay, now we're going to, I don't even know, like we're going to start making computers, and even that can be considered. It has to be something very different. Like if I said, all right, now we're going to do, can't even think of something. We're going to start cleaning parks. I don't know. That doesn't coincide with what we're doing. And if we started asking, mowing lawns. Let's say we're going to start mowing lawns and charging people to mow lawns. So we're going to go to people and say, hey, we're going to have kids from the Bronx mow your lawn, pay us $500. The kids are going to make money. That would be a different nonprofit, and that would possibly get our nonprofit revoked. So you need lawyers to understand what can you do, what can't you do. The board is very, very important in a nonprofit. So the board, so I'll tell you another thing. You want to start a nonprofit, and you have to create a board to look good to to non-investors. So to investors too. So when I get to the for-profit side, I'll get to that. If there's any questions, definitely ask. You have to have a good board. So because what happens is, let's say I'm going to give you $100,000 to your nonprofit. You're just looking at me as a guy who's doing this. But if your board has high-level people, then I know that money is safer. And it's the same thing in for-profits, right? If I give you $1 million and I know on your board there's 3 guys or girls or both that I know will make sure my money is spent in the best way, that just makes me feel better as an investor or a nonprofit funder. So you have to create a board. But when you create a board, what I didn't understand, and it's very similar to for-profits once you get to a certain level, is those board members can literally vote you out of your own nonprofit and company. If you think about it, if you look at the Steve Jobs story, he got voted out of Apple, right, by his board. And this happens on both sides. But with a nonprofit, the board is kind of like the CEO in a way. Like they have more say than anyone. The group together can decide what the nonprofit can do, what can't do. So I've literally heard situations, and I won't say the companies, where great nonprofits that were created with great missions, they created a board that they thought aligned with their mission. And as they wanted to try to do new things that were aligned, as that person who created that idea, as they tried to go to the next level and say, this aligns with our mission, the board members said, no, it doesn't. And we don't agree with you. You can't do it. So that person leaves the company because it's not what they want to do. They believe this is what it has to do, but the board stops them, right? So this is where a nonprofit, I believe, is different, because earlier on you need a strong board than in a for-profit. If you're going to raise venture capital, you do need a better a board. So it is very similar. Venture capital, and I guess it comes back to the same thing, and I never really thought about this till right now. It comes down to taking other people's money. If you want to take other people's money, you are going to have to deal with this. If you want to do as much of yourself and make your own sales and grow your company on your own, you don't need a board. Same with a nonprofit. If you could get money in services or fees or something that connects with your mission, you don't need a board, because the board is really to look better to the investors, whether they're for-profit investors like venture capitalists or funders for nonprofits. So a lot of times, if you look at pitch decks, right, for technology startups or whatever, their board is part of their team, right? They'll have the team, founder, co-founder, marketing, developer, board. That's for the investors to say, oh, wow, he has the CTO of Verizon on his board or her board. That's interesting. Or he has the ex-COO of AT&T, whatever it is, and that starts to look like, whoa, okay. So if you're going in the for-profit, but then there's legal, so this show is about legality. You have to have your board members fill out legal documents. So you have to make sure that those legal documents are right for nonprofit, for for-profit, because they're very different. On a for-profit, you can get away with almost anything. You can do anything you want if you're not publicly traded. If you're a publicly traded company, hold a different set of laws. So this is all stuff that it took me years to find out just by sitting in meetings, confused as hell. Like, I'm not going to ask this question. Sometimes I do ask because I'm on the board, right? So they've told me literally, if the company does something illegal, the board members are the ones that go to jail, So I'm like, oh, I definitely need to understand this. If I'm on a board, I need to make sure I understand this. So if you're going to run a company, you need to make sure you understand this. You can't just give this to lawyers and be like, oh, the lawyer understands it. I don't need to understand it. That's how you end up in hot water. So it doesn't look like Yuli's going to join, but I'll still fill this time. If anybody has questions, because I have extensive experience dealing with lawyers on both sides of the table of nonprofit, for-profit. So I'm going to continue with the nonprofit. So nonprofit, you have to make sure that your paperwork is much more in place at the beginning than in a for-profit. In a for-profit, you can literally operate unless you start making money. Once you start collecting money from people, which technology startups, sometimes they go a long time without getting sales, right? Like Facebook, right? They were able to just make a platform, people used it, and there was no money, no money exchange. But they were collecting data, knowing they were going to sell it. They were collecting data, knowing they were going to bring in advertisers. So they were able to wait to incorporate till they needed that, right? They didn't need to incorporate day one. For a nonprofit, if you want to start taking in funds, you have to operate for a little while, then apply. And that apply takes some time. Right. So like for us, we did what we were doing for years before we applied. And we end up, whole nightmare story, but we overtook another nonprofit that wasn't in operation as much. And we joined forces with them, and we thought it would make it go faster, but it didn't. Luckily, we had Lowenstein and Sandler, which is a huge law firm for venture capitalists. But they also help nonprofits, they do pro bono work. So they helped us, and a few others. I don't remember all the names, but Lowenstein and Sandler I remember because they've been helping us on both sides. They helped us make sure our paperwork was good, and now we've been for a while, we're able to take funds from people and they get whatever they need for their tax write-offs. So that's on the nonprofit side, right? On the for-profit side, what I would tell you is it really depends on what type of business you are creating. right? So if you create, like I just mentioned, a tech startup, until you start making money, you don't necessarily need to incorporate. Like, you don't have to. I'm reading this book called Slicing Pie, and everybody should check it out. And it literally talks about not incorporating for a year. Operate for a full year. Let everyone do what they're going to do to get their percentages. So let me give you the example. Partnership. Let's say you start a company with another person, and usually somebody will come at you and say, let's go at this 50-50, right? So, are you an Amazon seller? Yes, I am. Affiliate. Um, so let's say we go 50-50. We say, all right, we're going to do this idea 50-50. I'm going to do the tech. You're going to do the sales. We start working. The salesperson is working 80 hours a week trying to sell the product. I'm working 20 hours a week on this product, but I'm working 20 hours a week at my job. So it's half time. Over months and months and months, the disparity is gonna start to be very clear to that salesperson that it's not fair. I'm working 20 hours a week. He's working 80 hours a week, or she, and he or she's going to be like, this is not fair. It's not 50-50. How is this 50-50? And that's where relationships get broken. If we had a contract that said we are 50-50 partners from day one, then we are 50-50 partners. It doesn't matter what happens. If I spend 20 hours, he spends 80, she spends 80, we're still 50-50 partners. So what Slicing Pie teaches you is, all right, I'll hit you up. If with Slicing Pie, what we do is we just count our time, our investment of money, our sales, everything. We count it all. And there's a formula that will create how much we own of this company. So day one, we're not saying it's 50-50. We say, let's work and let's see where we end up. And then in a year, we look up and we say, okay, Miguel has only worked 20% of the time. He or she has worked 80% of the time. He or she owns 80%. I own 20%. And then if we get investors, those investors shift that pie. But the pie is not set in the beginning, and it's just set because that's what ruins relationships. So a lot of times you go to a lawyer and say, create this partnership agreement for me. You might be wasting money early on because who knows what the real is going to end up. Like, I've been in those situations, where it definitely wasn't fair on my side. And one time I went to this is a funny story. So I started out a company. It was 4 of us, childhood friends, and we each took 25% of the company. We didn't incorporate. We started doing the work. I was the only one that was doing it full time. Everybody else had a job. So I was working like crazy. But we all own 25%. So I was very early to business. That was literally my first business that I was an owner, and I created it from the start. So we started saying, all right, we started reading books, looking up, because none of us knew. So we said, all right, let's incorporate now. So what do we need to do? We need to create an operator agreement. So we got a lawyer. So we go to the lawyer. The lawyer says, okay, explain the company to me. We explained what we did. He said, all right, explain what each one of you does. We explained what we did. The lawyer said, look, I shouldn't do this because it's going to cost me probably the money you guys were going to pay me. But Miguel, I have no idea why you would be doing this. He said, it's so unfair to you. It doesn't make sense for you to do it. And I was like, oh shit. Like, and I did feel unfair. I felt like it was unfair. And we had many conversations. And but these are good friends. Like, I'm still friends with them to this day, thankfully. So I was like, look, it's not fair. This is not fair to me. And even the lawyer is saying it. So it killed the company. It did kill the company. It's messed up, but it did kill the company because we couldn't come to an agreement around what was fair. Instead of it, and that's very, very common in business, right? So creating a contract around something that you can't even foresee too early is tough. So that's what I like about the slicing pie model. So that's where you start. Another big thing for for-profits is, should I patent my idea? So certain lawyers will tell you one thing, certain lawyers will tell you other things. What I've heard from many, again, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to be invested in at large sums of money, and when I say large sums of money, I mean above 25 million, stuff like that. Even 10 million, I don't even think you need patents. What I've been told is patents are like rocks in water. They're easy to get around, right? But brands, they're harder to get around, right? So for instance, let's say, look at what Snapchat and Instagram, right? We're on Instagram right now. Barely anybody uses Snapchat anymore. Why? Instagram took their main feature and put it into Instagram. Do you think Snapchat didn't have a patent on that? Of course they did. They raised $20 billion. But yet their feature is still in Instagram, right? So again, Instagram had the brand though, right? So everybody was on Instagram. Snapchat was on the come up. But it wasn't nowhere near where Instagram was. It was on the come up. Instagram put their stuff, their Snapchat feature in, and that separation has never came close after that. And that's what these tech companies do. And you would think, how could they do that? And it's because they had good lawyers. The lawyer was like, well, we can get away with this. A lot of times in communities of color, this is why we created MetaBronx, and we have people like Yuli on our advisory board, is because a lot of times we get scared to do our idea because of the fear of the law. And I'll tell you another great story I had where I had to pay a lawyer, right? So I was working, this is for Mass Ideation, my for-profit. I was working on an augmented reality experience for IHOP, right? Through an agency. And so this is a multiple level story. So I went to the agency. They asked us to concept ideas. We went back and forth. But as you know, in an agency, they'll come back with their idea, right? And it could have some of your idea, but it can have a lot of their ideas. So they came back with an idea that had some of our ideas, some of their idea. So they said, okay, sign this contract. We're going to give you the budget that we agreed on. But in the contract, lucky I had a lawyer read it, it said 100% indemnification goes to Mass Ideation. I didn't know what indemnification meant, right? Like, if you could Google it, but you don't really know until you talk to a lawyer. Lawyer told me, this means if they get sued for any reason for this experience you're creating, you're liable. Like, the whoever's suing is going to sue you, not them. So I was like, that's not fair, right? And the lawyer was like, definitely not fair. But if you don't know any better, you don't know any better. So I went back to the agency. I said, look, you guys came up with as much of this idea as us. So how come we are the only ones that get, hit if something happens? So we agreed on a 50-50 indemnification. So we did the project, got paid, went out, no problems. Then Nickelodeon came to us. They came to us because we were one of the only people doing augmented reality. We had a track record. People knew me. I was speaking at conferences already. They came to me. This time it was direct with, so when you work with an agency, the agency is the middleman, right? The brand hires the agency hires the vendor. So Mass Ideation, we do all that. We do vendor, we do direct, we do nonprofit, everything, right? So the direct was Viacom. Viacom owns Nickelodeon. Viacom does not accept any indemnification. Their contract said 100% goes to mass ideation, and we're not budging. So I said, okay, how much do I want this project? This project was a substantial amount of money, like substantial, right? So I was like, okay, let me start doing my homework. Started talking to lawyers. There weren't many lawyers that knew about augmented reality. So what does that mean? The lawyers I had to speak to were much more expensive, right? Because I was in the cutting edge technology space, I had to deal with cutting edge technology lawyers, which means cutting edge money. So I called around. I had been speaking at different conferences, so I met people. So I called a lot of people that I met that were in the AR space, law space. So right off the bat, it was like, yeah, we can sign an agreement and we can advise you. So I was like, shit, all right. But the lawyer fees were like substantial. I'm talking about like $1,000 an hour stuff, right? So it was like, fuck. But I need this information. So I thought, I had thought, because this was early in my for-profit business career, I thought when you were just asking a question, it wasn't being billed at first. So I signed something that said, because a lawyer will send you something that says, here, sign this before we speak. I thought, being very green, that just protected what we were talking about. But in there, it literally says, you're going to be billed for this time that we're talking. And I didn't know that. So we're talking, and you see me, I can talk, no problem. So I'm talking to this guy for like half an hour, maybe an hour, I don't remember exact. And he tells me, look, you're in the cutting edge of this stuff. So the best thing to do is to make sure you don't get sued, is to do a right to do business, I think it's called, search, where that means they're going to search all the patents and see if what you're doing infringes on any potential patent, so you can know not to do it. That will cost you $50,000. So I remember thinking, wow, I'm in the wrong business. Definitely would have ate into my profit tremendously. So I said, that's not an option, right? So I told him, okay, so what happens if you do this search and you find out that I can't do this? He said, then you just can't do it. I said, do I get my money back? He was like, oh, no. And I was like, okay, so I can spend $50,000 and be told I can't do this? Why would I do that? Like, and then I I'm like, look, literally, like, I'm asking you as a entrepreneur, how does that make sense? And he said, well, do you want to get sued for 500,000? And I was like, of course not. So he said, look, this is where you end up. You could either decide to take on this project with 100% indemnification, meaning somebody comes to sue you, you got to eat that cost and basically close your company down, possibly get people coming after your personal assets, or just don't do the project. At that time, I was a rebel and I didn't have much. So I was like, you know what? I'll start the company over. And I did it. I did it with 100% indemnification. Thank God nobody ever came back. And I did it. But also, the guy sent me a bill for, I believe it was like $1,000, something like that. And I was like, I thought we were just talking. And then he was like, well, what you signed was us starting our relationship. And while we talk, I'm billing you. And I was like, oh, man, I definitely would have sped that conversation up if I knew I was being billed, And he was like, look, we'll write it off. I understand you didn't know, but that's how the industry works. You need to make sure you understand that. You don't want to be wasting people's time. And I was like, Definitely. I'm glad I understand that now, because I would have asked you in 10 minutes, like, and I was lucky, right? I didn't have to pay it. But this is how it works. You create retainers as a for-profit. You can create a retainer and nonprofit. But as a for-profit, the way, even with that first company, right, where we went into the lawyer's office and he told me I shouldn't do it, we were about to start a retainer with the guy. We hadn't even paid him yet. And he was like, Miguel, I wouldn't do this if I was you. And I was like, whoa. To me, I'm like, damn, that's a good lawyer, though, because he foresaw the problem. And he said, look, I don't even want to put these people through that problem. Let them figure it out. If you can't figure it out before you start paying a lawyer, don't do it. And we didn't. We were all young. We were just figuring out business, and we realized it wasn't going to work in a way that felt fair to everybody. So we moved on. But as a for-profit person that's looking for legal advice, what you should be doing, this is what I do now, and this is what I advise. So if you're trying to do, all right, I'm going to give you each one. A for-profit that doesn't intend to raise money, meaning you're not looking for investors. You're just going to create something that you think can make you money, and you're cool with growing it on your own. I would incorporate that early on, because you're planning to take in money. So to take in money, it should go into a company, right? It needs a bank account, it needs a tax ID. You want to make sure, depends on how big you want to go, because there are some sole proprietors that just take the tax, they pay the tax personally. But if you want to start growing a business that's like multiple employees and all that, you're going to want a corporation to hire them under. You're going to want an employee contract that you make people who work for you sign. So for me, as that I have freelancers, when I hire full-timers, they have to sign something that protects me and them, right? So that's a contract you need to create. So you can go to a lawyer and say, okay, I need these things. And they can say, okay, we start a retainer. You should be able to get these things out of it. But then there's technology solutions too, right? Where there's a technology solutions like LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer, stuff like that, right? So I'll put links. And what they do is they have ready-made contracts that are not as customizable. They are customizable, though, because they ask you questions like, okay, what's your name? What's your company name? Address? What is it that this person is going to do? And then the contract gets created. You literally could just forward that contract to the person. They sign it. It's sent back. That's for like a low-level thing, right? If you're starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger, you're going to want your own custom contract. So you're going to talk to a lawyer, get on a retainer, start the contract. Maybe now lawyers work different, where they'll just create those things for you for a certain price. I don't know. I haven't had to deal with a lawyer in a while for profit. So that's one. That's the business where you are going to try to make sales right away, and you're going to try to grow this thing, have employees, have partners. Another big thing, just before I forget, you don't have to give out the shares of your company. So you could create partnerships and not give the percentages up front, right? And that only happens once you dole out the shares. So like, let's say we 50-50 and we do 10,000 shares, then we each get 5,000 shares. That makes us 50-50. If I get 40,000 shares, you get 60, or she gets 60, then I'm 40%, she's 60. So you can incorporate, then revisit the shares later. So that's on the non-tech startup, investment. So now let's say you do want to get a tech investor. They want C Corp Delaware. So that means, there's different types of corporation. There's S Corp. So mass ideation is an S Corp. That means it just passes through. So any profit that mass ideation makes, it's like I made it. So they're going to tax me on it. So I need to, it's kind of like an extension of me. It's a consultancy. It was recommended by a lawyer and an accountant to me, right? So as a corporation that's going to raise money, though, I can't, as an S Corp, I can't take investment from another company as an S Corp. So C corps can do that. So C corps is what investment funds want to invest in because they can invest as a company, right? So they invest in the C corp. Why Delaware? Delaware because Delaware has what's called the legal standard in a way of how to deal with disputes. So what happens in a legal case is if you are, let's say I'm operating in New York and my company was created in New York, there's a dispute, that dispute would have to happen in New York. And there's different laws, different situations, right? So what the tech investors know is Delaware has the laws in the best way that helps them, get their repercussions or whatever, get the fair fight. So they all want to have their corporations in Delaware because they know everything that works there. So as a company owner that wants to raise funds, you need to have a corporation in Delaware for them to be willing to give you the money. Of course, you can still do it in different ways, but the best way to do it is a C corp in Delaware. So for that, you need to incorporate as a C corp. There are shares. A big thing to understand as an entrepreneur, this is a tax thing. Maybe I'll have an accountant on. I'm going to get an accountant on. Is C corps get double taxed. So when you get paid out as the owner of a C corp, you get taxed, and then the corporation gets taxed. As an S corp, the corporation is basically me in a way. So it does get taxed, but I'm getting taxed pretty much. And even that's probably not a great explanation. I'll bring in a tax person to really explain it. So basically, nonprofits, there you can do your local, wherever you are, you can incorporate locally because it doesn't matter to the funders where you are. They're not going to sue you and stuff like that. They just want to make sure that you are a legal nonprofit so you can create this entity wherever it is, be legal so they can get their benefit for giving you money. And the first thing you need to do there is who are the officers of this. Like they have that for profit. So officers are like president, treasurer, stuff like that, right? I think president and treasurer are all you need, I think. For a for-profit, you have that too, but it's not as important to a nonprofit, right? As the president of a nonprofit, you're liable for any wrongdoing. And I guess for-profit too. It's just you have to get to a very high level and be doing really illegal stuff for a for-profit to get in trouble. For a nonprofit, you do something very small by mistake that is against the law, and you don't know that. And this is why lawyers are so important to nonprofits, because you can literally end up in jail versus just having to pay fines or whatever it is in a for-profit. So, I know Yuli wasn't able to come on. Hopefully I can get him on another day. But basically, advice I would give you, I'm gonna end off with the advice I would give you if you're gonna start each one of these things. If you're gonna start a nonprofit, I tell you there are there are pro bono nonprofit lawyers. So there's Lawyers Alliance, who they helped us too. Lawyers Alliance will find you a pro bono lawyer to help you incorporate your nonprofit, right? And then deal with the back and forth. So I believe Lawyers Alliance is how we got Lowenstein Sandler. Plus, we had other connectors to Lowenstein Sandler. So you will go to like a Lawyers Alliance, get them to help you. There's many organizations that will get pro bono lawyers. So look up that. Get your corporation, your nonprofit corporation created. Make sure you have all the paperwork right before you start accepting nonprofit money. What you should do in the beginning is create services that you can be paid for that do work within your mission to get you up to the time of getting nonprofit funds. And then for a for-profit that's looking to just make money fast and grow, I would tell you to incorporate. Again, you can go to a nonprofit. You can go to one of these Lawyers Alliance kind of things, and they will find you a nonprofit lawyer. Or you can just, and I've done this myself, you can go to like Rocket Lawyers, LegalZoom, and incorporate right there for whatever, $200, $500. Um, a lot of times accountants can get you incorporated. So if you have an accountant, they can help you with that. And I've done that in the past too with different companies. But what you really want to make sure, and this is something I didn't know early on, is you want to talk to a lawyer and an accountant before you incorporate, because you want to know the right way legally, but also the right way for taxes, right? Because you can do something the wrong way and end up paying a lot more taxes than you could if you did it another way. So you want to definitely talk to a lawyer and an accountant. And maybe one of the shows I'll bring in both. Maybe I'll bring in a lawyer and an accountant and we hash it out. Battle. Okay. So if you want to create a for-profit that's looking for investors, you're setting this up strictly to get investment and you know you're going to look for money. You want to create a C Corp in Delaware. So for that, like I've literally done that on like LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer, shit, stuff like that. And those companies still exist, and they have registered agents, and because registered agent is to make sure you are still in good standing with your C Corp in Delaware. You have to pay something every year. So there's fees to all this too that you need to understand. Okay, if I incorporate as an LLC, there's all kind of laws. So that first company I told you about, we incorporated as an LLC. We had 4 partners. There were all kind of rules behind that, like that we didn't know, that we didn't understand until we started speaking to lawyers. I mean, we incorporated. That was the thing. We incorporated, but we didn't do our operator agreement. That's what we did. So we were just operating as a company, but really with no law structure that would protect any one of us. So that's a huge mistake that a lot of people make. They'll incorporate, they have partners, but they don't have like the operator agreement. And that is what, agreements are not for when everything is fine and dandy. A contract is for when stuff goes wrong. Let's agree up front on how we're going to deal with it. So, I wouldn't be afraid of it. I wouldn't spend unnecessary money on it either. If you trust the people, you trust the people. I'm working on companies right now without operator agreement. So I this goes both ways. You can do it, be super buttoned up, or you can do it in a way that is best for the growth of the company. So in the one that I'm doing, we don't have an operator agreement. That one is already raised money, but we're raising money from angels, which means, and friends and family, which means it's not venture capitalists. They don't care. They're in it for, maybe it works and they get a nice huge chunk of money, but it's not like they are, seasoned venture capitalists that are like, whoa, it needs to be by the book. But we are lining it up to do that. So we are taking the proper steps, and everything I'm talking to you right now is what we're doing. We are not even incorporated yet, and we took in money. We are positioning ourselves to take in big money and have all our ducks in a row for that. And that's not just as legal. We got to have our product at a certain place. We have to have our team at a certain place. So we're working on that before we work on all that. So that's where I'm at. I think I'm going to end it here. Too bad Yuli wasn't able to join, but I'm sure I'll get him on one day. And we'll go from here. I think have a good weekend. Stay safe. Hopefully I answered, I guess you brought you value. If it did and you watched all the way, please like it wherever you are. It just means it'll show it to more people. And I hope to bring on Yuli one day, but I will definitely bring on a lawyer, have many in our circle. And thank you, Athena, for watching. Thank you anybody who's watched. Have a good weekend and start doing your idea. Make it happen. Make it happen, because right now I'm seeing so much opportunity out there. I wish I could grab it all and do it all. I can't, but there's enough for all of us. There's opportunity everywhere. So go grab it. Have a good weekend. Work on your idea. Come back, Entrepreneur Hour Monday. Thank you for watching.